All right, in this lesson, we are going to look at filtering with an EQ. What filtering does is basically what we want to do is we want to separate each tracks, basically whether they are a low sound, a mid sound, or a high sound. And we want to separate them so they're kind of within their own frequency range so that they can be easily mixed. So a good example is basically like bass lines generally fill up the bottom end. And so we want our bass lines to be, prominent in the bass frequencies within our mix. Our synths kind of fill up the mid-range sounds. So we want our synths to be prominent in those frequencies. And then our plucks and things like that are quite prominent in the high pitches. So we want those to really stand out. And this will make mixing a lot easier because you've got more room within those frequency bands to mix things, as well as, I guess, overall volume as well. We've got to think about frequencies when we're mixing. Now, this might sound confusing, but what we'll do is we'll just demonstrate, as per usual, what I do when I'm filtering with EQ before we kind of do a tonal EQ, which means to kind of enhance the sound by shaping the tone. But yeah, we'll start off with filtering the EQ. So I always start with the bass line. So I'm just going to drag this EQ8 onto the bass line here. And I'm going to make use of, I guess I'll better explain the EQ before we start. So basically we've got different bands that we can use here. So I guess a low, mid, a mid-high, and a high frequency band. What this does is actually we can turn up and down individual frequencies. So for example, in the low mid, we can turn up the frequencies there to make those louder and not make the whole track louder, just make individual frequencies within the EQ a lot louder or softer if we wanted to as well. We can also turn on more bands by clicking on the numbers underneath. So we're not limited to 4 bands. We can kind of shape things the way we want, in a lot more different ways by turning on more bands. But we're just going to use the 4 to start off with. Down the bottom, we have a different types of curves, I guess, we can use within our EQ. So at the moment, we're using a shelf on band 1, which means if I was to turn this up, the shelf kind of links to the end of the EQ. But if I was to change this to a low pass filter, which is I'll just demonstrate that again, which is this shape here. What that does is filters out sound. So we're going to be looking at filters on both ends of the frequency spectrum. So what we call a high pass filter and a low pass filter on this side. So this lets the lows pass, this one lets the highs pass. Okay, so looking at our baseline, we are going to filter out, generally this is how I start. So I filter out with my bass anything kind of below 20 hertz at least, but around 100 hertz, because this is what we call, I guess, the mud of the mix. And the frequencies are quite often inaudible or close to inaudible, so you can't actually hear them. And all they do is kind of add like a muddiness, a thickness to the bass frequencies in our composition. So what I've done here is just selected the high pass filter. And so what's happening is just kind of filtering out these lower frequencies, but we're leaving it relatively low. So I might just boost that a little bit by boosting the frequency knob. And we've gotten rid of some of the muddiness at the bottom end. All right, so with our bass frequencies, what we want is we don't really want a lot of these high frequencies in there because we want to leave this space for our pluck sounds. We want to leave these for our synths. So what I'm going to do is turn this low pass filter on here, and I'm going to make it the 4 times one, so that makes it really steep. So it's pretty much a sharp drop off. And I'm going to start, what I generally do is I will play the track and I'll solo it. And I'll start getting rid of the high frequencies until it starts to sound a bit weird. So I'll demonstrate this right now. So as you can probably hear with that, I've gone a bit too far. It doesn't really sound like a nice bass anymore. It's just a rumble. I'll play it again. So I'm just going to now kind of boost it until it starts to sound where I'm happy with it. So again, our bass frequencies, we want to leave a lot of this space for the synths and the plucky sounds up the top. So I'm just going to boost it until it kind of sounds acceptable in a bass sound that I'd be going for. So this might seem like there's not a lot of bass frequencies coming through, or sorry, not a lot of sound coming through. It's because the volume does actually decrease when you get rid of a lot of the high frequencies. So it's quite common after this to actually boost the bassline track because we've cut so much of the volume out of the high end. So now I'm just going to boost it with the rest of the track. So I'm just going to listen and make sure it fits in with the rest of the track in terms of volume. And so now I've kind of filtered out my my high frequencies in my bass to leave room for our synths and stuff like that. And it's going to make our synths and like I guess our drums and all the other effects stand out a lot more if we keep this to the bottom end. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to look at is our melody. I'm just going to use the main pluck melody here. So I'm going to bring an EQ8 onto this. And the first thing I'm going to do is add the high pass filter to the synth, the melody synth. And I'm just going to play it, and I'm just going to boost the melody up until it kind of starts to sound weird. So I'm just going to boost the frequency up until the melody starts to sound a bit too tinny with the lack of frequencies. But what you'll find is you'll be able to boost, I guess we'll change the frequency and kind of crank the frequency up. And it won't sound weird until you start getting around here and removing a lot of the bass frequencies. I'll demonstrate right now. We might solo that just so it's a bit clearer. And I'll drag it back down so we start again. And I think that's about right. So what we've basically done is we've left this space down here for the bass, and I guess our mids can go up here. Now we can try to filter out some of the high frequencies if we want, and in some cases it works, but sometimes it's better to leave that airy kind of sound in, but we'll have a go. So I can get rid of a little bit here at the top because I don't think that really changes the sound. I'll demonstrate by turning the track on and off as we play it so you can hear the differences. So it does sound a bit tinier now, but if I play it with the rest of the track and yeah, just have a listen to it, it kind of complements the bass a lot more. So we basically want to do this on every track. We want to go through and just figure out where we can cut it off from the low frequencies and where we can cut it off from the high frequencies, just so we can leave a lot of space in our mix for mixing. So yeah, this will help balance out our track a lot more. I'll do one more synth right now, so I'll just do the chords left here, and I will just solo this track here so we can just hear it. So I'm going to bring the EQ onto this chords left track. And I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to start filtering out some of the low frequencies. And yeah, you'll find that you will not miss these bottom frequencies at all within this synth. Now, with some of the high ones here, we might miss them immediately. So we'll just have a play around. So I'm going to boost that right up and just slowly decrease until until it starts to sound a bit too, I guess, thin and doesn't work and fill out the sound. So I'm happy with that. So if I have done this to the left, these right hand side chords are exactly the same. So I'm just going to copy this EQ and drag it or paste it onto the right track. And there, within this section, we'll have a lot thinner, but I guess more complementary chord sound that kind of works with your bass and the melody and everything. So yeah, we want to go through and do this to every track. So I'm going to go through now and actually apply this kind of this EQ and this filtering, I guess, to every track, and we'll see how it sounds at the end. Okay, so I've gone through every track and EQ'd, or filtered with an EQ, all the frequencies that I don't need in each track. So for example, with my chords, I've narrowed it down to this frequency band, or these frequency bands within this orange line here, as all the frequencies that are needed within this chord synth. So that one should be the same. But then, yeah, down here, this chords, what frequencies I need are narrowed down. Likewise with my arps. Likewise with my pads. I've gone through all my melodies and narrowed out what I need from both ends of the frequency spectrum. I've even gone through all of my drums, and like for our hi-hats, for example, snares, and worked out what frequencies work and I guess what frequencies you don't really need in the mix that make no difference to the mix. So I might just play through a section so you can hear it. And what you should be able to hear is that the mix is a whole lot cleaner, and yeah, it doesn't have a lot of like mud or rumble or anything else that isn't wanted within a mix. So let's just have a listen to our drop and you'll hear the clarity. Okay, cool. So that's how you use an EQ to filter your mix. And yeah, just going through your mix and clearing it out by getting rid of all the unwanted frequencies in each individual track and just making it sound a lot clearer. Moving on to tonal shaping within an EQ.